Hi, everyone. I'm Kathy Jo Peterson. I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota. I grew up in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, and I'm going to start my story by saying that my dad died of age 49 in 1982 of what we presume to be a heart attack. We did not have an autopsy done, and my dad was overweight, smoked a lot, and we decided that that is how he died. Um, my uncle Eddie, his brother, died at age 38 of also what we thought was a heart attack. He showed up to work for my dad at a restaurant my dad owned in 1956. They had an argument, and Uncle Eddie went across the street and fell down the steps of the hotel and died of a heart attack. My whole entire life, I also struggled with my weight. I was at a top of 303 pounds when I got into what is a 12-step recovery program and changed my eating ways and my whole entire life. And if you notice, I have a little bit of a odd voice. I sometimes struggle breathing. And that is something else that I struggled a lot with in my life. I had people tell me, do you have asthma? Do you have allergies? And now I'm going to go to 2019. I felt like I was at the top of my game. I was feeling good. I was looking good. And I lost my job in February of 2019, and that was devastating. And then in March of 2019, my mother-in-law had a stroke, and I was at her funeral, and people were following me around, including my brother and my husband's uncle. And they were encouraging me to go to the doctor. My son told me I sounded like Darth Vader. And I found out later when I was diagnosed with a disease called idiopathic subglottic tracheal stenosis that the voice that you get, you sound like Darth Vader. They call it the Darth Vader voice. Anyway, while they were looking at that to make sure I didn't have cancer or anything, they did a CAT scan of my chest. And in that diagnosis, they found an aneurysm on my aorta. And when the doctor called me, he said, Kathy Jo, you're a very, very sick woman. You have two things going on. First of all, you have a blockage in your airway, which is most likely idiopathic subglottic tracheal stenosis. And you're going to have surgery in the next few days. And we're going to get you on a very strong steroid in the middle of it all until you're up on the operating table, because this is a life-threatening situation. So most people, and I might be off with what I say here today, our windpipe is about the size of a garden hose, okay? When I went in for surgery, mine was the size of a straw. And I was breathing through this very, very small airway. When the doctor told me I also had an aneurysm on my aorta, he said, I want you to see a cardiologist in the next 3 to 6 months. I thought, oh, I'm 58 years old. It's probably not very big, because he's not saying get to a cardiologist right away. He's saying in the next 3 to 6 months. So I probably have this like little tiny dot. I didn't even know what an aneurysm was on my aorta. And someday they're going to have to do something about it. But in the meantime, they're probably going to prescribe something like baby aspirin or something. And then maybe when I'm 80, they're going to say, you need to have open heart surgery. And I'll say, you know what? I'm 80, so let's just forget it. And I'll just die when I die. So I had the trachea surgery and they opened me up. And what I believe is, in order to have open heart surgery, you have to be trached and you have to have an airway open. So you can't go in with an airway like this for open heart surgery, and you got to be open, right? So, and stress causes my disease to make you close up again. So like I said, I'd lost my job and I was at my mother-in-law's funeral. So a lot was going on for me. So I closed up even more real quickly. And it was a life-threatening situation. So when I had open heart surgery, they needed to make sure that I had an open airway so they could do the surgery. And they didn't want to tell me how bad my aneurysm was because they didn't want to freak me out. They wanted me to be open so they could do the surgery. A planned surgery for open heart is always better than an unplanned. I know that for a fact. So also when you have any kind of surgery, it can cause scarring in the windpipe and you can close up again. So they also wanted to make sure I stayed open. So I went in like clockwork 3 months later. And I found out some very alarming news. I found out that I had an aneurysm back to the garden hose. I'm pretty sure our aorta is supposed to be about the size of a garden hose. I don't have an example here, but I know it's bigger than this. That's a canning jar. I had aneurysm as big as the bottom of a Coke can on my aorta, which is a 5.2. Usually they operate when you're somewhere between 5 and 5.5. I started to research it like crazy. And I read, if you're taller, you can wait longer. So I was like, oh, good. I'm tall. I'm 5'8". We can go to 5.5. I don't know when I'll be 5.5, but we can wait. But then they did more testing and we found out that I have a bicuspid valve. And when you have, if people don't know about that, our aortic valve is supposed to be like a Mercedes with the three, the three little dealy bobs, whatever you want to call them. And I have a bicuspid valve, which is only 2 flaps. So the blood that goes in and out is not regulated. It's like a crazy hurricane all the time. So, when I got in and was dealing with all this stuff, I just want to say I was tired. I was really tired. And I used to beat myself up for not having more energy, not doing more, not going up that big, huge hill. Even though I had lost over 100 pounds, life just felt a lot harder for me. But here I was walking around with an airway that was really small, and I had this aneurysm on my aorta, and I had like this hurricane thing going on in my blood flow from the day I was born. So anyway, needless to say, I felt really sorry for myself, and I felt mad at what I'm going to call my God. And I remember having kind of a sob story and sharing it with different people. And one of my cousins said, God has been preparing you for this your whole life. So what I'm going to say is, I was really glad when I got up on that operating table, and even when I had my angiogram before surgery to see if I had any blockages, that I was down 100 pounds. I didn't have kidney disease. I didn't have diabetes. I didn't have high blood pressure. I just had an aneurysm and a windpipe issue. So when I was geared up for surgery, I talked to some of my trachea group people. And by the way, I wear a medical bracelet every day. And it says right on it, use pediatric tube, narrow airway. So I went and I met with my anesthesiologist and I'm like, hey, when we do the surgery, I need the kids' trachea trach because I have a very small airway and I can't have you put that big one in there because if you put the 7 in there, you're going to damage my trachea and then I'm going to have trachea surgery again. And I don't want to have trachea. I'm telling them what to do. Okay. And he looked at me and he said, you can't use a kid's tube for open heart surgery. You're going to have at least a 7, if not bigger. And I just went, all right. So one thing I want to say is I am a control person, and I am a researcher. But as I went along this process, every single time I turned it over to the doctors. And I put my trust in the doctors because the doctors became God's hands for me. So I just went, all right, do it. A part of my recovery in my 12-step program is that I have not had sugar in 12 years. And I found out they were going to put glucose syrup in my IV after surgery. So I also met with the anesthesiologist and I said, I don't want any glucose syrup in my IV because I'm a compulsive eater and I can't have that. And he said, do you want your heart to start working again? Because the only way that we can get your heart back up and running is for us to put glucose syrup in your IV. And I'm like, do the glucose. So anyway, I remember when I went in for my angiogram, and I remember when my dad had his angiogram, and my dad actually died a few days after that, and he had a lot of blockages. I had no blockages. And I remember my doctor and the intern saying to me, people like you bounce back right away from things like this. I said, what do you mean by bounce back? And they said, well, you're healthy. And I just want to say it's such a gift when I had all this done that I was as healthy as I could be. And, I was already on a path of recovery before I got all this news. But I think, one of the things I would say is if you're waiting, do your best to get healthy. Don't pull up at Kentucky Fried Chicken all the time. Take care of your health, because the odds are in way more in our favor if we're in a healthy place before we have this huge surgery. So I do believe I got a really good, smart cardiologist to diagnose me and look at what was going on. She decided I did not need to have my valve replaced because even though it was crazy, all this stuff going on, there was no stenosis, so to speak. So I just had the aneurysm repair. And I'm going to say I felt very taken care of. I had people in the waiting room, my sister-in-law, my husband, and my daughter. And I went to all 30 days of the rehab afterwards. And you're not supposed to drive for 30 days. And I got a ride every single time. I never had to take Uber. My mom came and stayed with me for 3 weeks and helped me out. And I would say pain-wise, I had a lot of pain in my left shoulder, and I still have a lot of neck pain, but I never had any incision pain. I think my incision looks pretty good. I did get some laser treatments on it. I don't really know if I had post-traumatic stress from surgery. I've had a lot of crap in my life that has happened that make me a candidate for post-traumatic stress times 7. So I can't really answer that one. I also believe because I work a program where I try to live in gratitude and connection with my higher power and taking care of myself, that keeps me above water and feeling okay in spite of what I'm dealt with. I'm in the middle of a divorce right now and I'm doing okay, feeling supported again. I am going to say when I was in the hospital and I was waiting for the physical therapist to come in so they could, rehab therapists, I guess they are, to help me walk and go up steps to figure out when I can go home. Like maybe day 1.5, I was getting a little crabby because they weren't coming in. And what happened is I ended up finding out that there were people that couldn't even get out of bed and they were helping them. And when the rehab person finally came in my room, he told me, Kathy Jo, you're the healthiest person on this unit. And so that's another way that I feel very blessed. And I've had, so my surgery was October 3rd, 2019, when the doctor put the dates down, October 3rd was my dad's birthday, and he died at age 49 before his 50th birthday. I knew right away there was 3 dates. I picked that date in honor of him. And I haven't said this yet, but when I was first diagnosed with the bicuspid valve and the aneurysm and dissection was explained to me, which I didn't even know what it was, I said to my doctor, when someone dissects, do they ever like puke blood? And she said, yes. And I said, oh, because my dad puked blood all day the day he died. And then I said, when someone dissects, can they appear to be drunk? And she said, yes. Why? And I said, because my Uncle Eddie died in 1956 because apparently he came on a Sunday morning at 10:30 to work for my dad in the morning, drunk. And whenever I heard that story, I always thought, how can you be drunk at 10:30 in the morning? I mean, you can be, but I think it's really rare. My family might disagree with me, but I'm pretty sure that my dad and my Uncle Eddie died of dissections. And it's another reason I feel blessed today. I was really afraid that maybe my kids were bicuspid because bicuspid is a hereditary disease. And there was an event here in Minnesota called Players for Patrick. It's a nonprofit that was started in honor of a 14-year-old boy who made a goal for a hockey tournament up north, and then he collapsed and he died. He not dissected, but he now I can't remember what it's called, but his aorta exploded. I don't have the word right now. I think it starts with a D also, but so his parents started a non-profit in his honor, and they show up at hockey tournaments and they test kids with volunteer cardiologists and radiologists, etc., to find out if they have a possible aneurysm or a bicuspid valve. And because the year they came, or the year of 2020, right before COVID, they had a hockey tournament in Apple Valley, Minnesota, 20 minutes from my house. And because there was this huge snowstorm, a lot of people didn't make it down here. And so they had room, and they scanned my 2 kids. And I remember when the ultrasound tech, and he was a retired guy, he said, you know, I'm going to look at them one more time. And he sat down and he got a big, huge smile and he said, they're both tricuspid. It was such a relief to find out that my kids were okay. But I think a big message I want to say is I'm okay. And I am not as tired. And I think part of that is the trachea is taken care of. I'm still open. I did have to have one more surgery after my open heart surgery, I'm pretty sure. I had to be intubated overnight. I was really mad at the nurse in intensive care. And I was naughty. I was not a good patient. She kept doing tests to try to see if I could breathe on my own. So she would turn the machine off and I would fall asleep. And then the beeping machines would go off because I wasn't breathing. So she finally came in, and she was this short little stout lady, and she goes, we're going to keep your tubes in overnight. We'll check you in the morning. And I wrote a note to her and I said, I'm cold. I'm hungry. Get out of my room now. The next morning, they came in at 7:00 and they checked my breathing, and I breathed on my own. And they took the tubes out. And at 2 p.m, during shift change, I said, is the charge nurse here that was here from last night? And they said, yes. And I said, will you send her in? She came in, I looked at her and I said, I'm sorry. You were right. I needed to be intubated because I wasn't breathing on my own. Anyway, so I ended up having to have trachea surgery again, February 2020, 14th, Valentine's Day. And ever since then, doctor says I'm okay. I sit at about 70%. I'm not a garden hose, but the doctor said, if we open you up, you're probably going to close back that much again. So we'll just leave you. So that's where I am. So that's why I sound a little bit, I don't know what I sound, but I can hear it. And the smoke from Canada is not doing me any good lately either. I think that is all I got. I'm staring at my notes here. I think I want to say ask for help. We don't have to do this alone. Reach out to other survivors, find other people to hear their hope, their experience, what it feels like to be on the other side. I'm going to say I did reach out to some people beforehand, and some of them, there are people out there that say, I wish I would have died on the operating table. I'm in so much pain. I'm so depressed. My life sucks. You know, I don't know why it's like that for them, but try to find some stories of hope, because just because someone's story is super hard doesn't mean yours has to be. And just because someone else's is super easy doesn't mean you're going to have it that way either. There was a survivor that told me to get on anxiety medications right away and that I'm going to need them forever. I'm not on anxiety medications and I sleep like a rock every night. So I guess I'm okay with that. And, you know, there was a time where I felt sorry for myself and why me? But I'm going to say I've met so many wonderful people along this path. My life has gotten richer and I feel more gratitude. And I'll pass with that. Thank you so much, Joshua.